Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we'll be taking a look through my collection of Robert Opie scrapbooks. Now this is a series of amazing hardbacks full of packaging and memorabilia and items of interest from throughout the last century. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay then, so it's probably been about 5 years since I've actually had these out and shown them on the channel, and quite a bit has changed since then, and I'd like to go back and show you these books one by one in one long video, and also in much better quality than it was back then, back 5 years ago. So this is the earliest one period wise, and I don't believe they actually got published in chronological order, but they did go back, and this is like the earliest sort of era, the Victorian scrapbook. And beautiful, large, very large format hardbacks. They are enormous books, but they are fantastic. They really, really are. Yeah, this one's actually dated 1999. They're all still in print, so you can get these books off Amazon if you really fall in love with them, as I did. And not only have I fallen in love with the books, I mean, I've lent them to other people, and they've just poured over them. It is just a fantastic series. Which, if you've got any sort of passing interest in the sort of the history of packaging, or if you're a bit of a collector, you're going to absolutely love these books. So yeah, this is the Victorian one. And what you'll find is, as we go through these, the books are very much in a particular style. So they'll open up with like a bit of a photograph there, and then they'll look at the same sort of aspects in different eras or decades. So this is the Victorian one. Now we've got a lot to get through, so I'm not going to hang around too long. However, we are filming this in 4K, so if there's a page you particularly want to have a look at, you can just pause and have a bit of a longer look. You could say the Victorian era was the start of modern day packaging, really, and advertising. Here's some of the period magazines and comics of the time. Newspapers, an issue of the Strand there. And Robert Opie and his wife were absolute. The foresight that they had to pick this sort of stuff up when you could still find it and preserve it was, well, what foresight, really, And I think they were doing this right up into the 70s. And of course, nowadays, a lot of their collection, obviously not all of it, but a lot of the collection can now be seen at the Museum of Brands in London, which is an absolutely fantastic place to visit, and where you can see basically these books come to life. Here's some old like bottles and sauces and things like that. Absolutely love this sort of stuff. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's been quite a while since I've had these out, but I have to be putting some of my sort of larger books into storage quite soon. So I wanted to take the opportunity to give these another film before that happened. There's some cigarettes, and back then, of course, less cigarettes, more like rolling tobacco and pipe tobacco, I guess, and snuff. And these really are sort of historical documents. Scraps that go into scrapbooks. This looks like seed package, packets of seeds. And some jigsaws. It was a very popular time, the Victorian era, for these sort of picture jigsaws, and you can find these around today. I wouldn't say they were mega money. It's quite interesting, but a lot of Victorian stuff isn't a fortune if you wanted to collect it these days. Nobody's collecting it for nostalgia of having it at the time. Too much time has passed, but it's not an era that's massively collected these days, so consequently prices are quite reasonable if it's something that you really fancy. I do find this Victorian stuff fascinating. I mean, it was so detailed, wasn't it? And all of this, of course, hand drawn, all these pictures. I mean, what a skill. The age of the greetings card. biscuit tins. Royal commemoratives. Items related to the Boer War. What a great ad that is for Coleman's mustard. Look at that. And then down here we got events of the Victorian era, 1837 to 1901. What an incredible age that was for well, the world really, and yeah, hence the Victorian era. And there we are. So that is the first rather amazing book. Now, the next one is the 1910s. So that, of course, encompasses First World War. So the 1910s, the decade of the Great War. Yeah, there we are. So a fair bit of First World War, which took up, the build-up, and then the actual war itself, which took up a lot of the decade. Here we are. Make sure everything is nicely in picture and in focus. Yep, so this is like a little montage of bits and pieces of what's to come. Really interesting end papers. And when you go through these books, you can literally just sit down and you can spend hours with a single volume. When you go through, you read all the accompanying text. Not that there's loads of it, but it's like pictures that actually do speak thousands of words. So, of course, it was the era of Titanic as well, the Titanic disaster. So very much, celebrating King George. Took over from Victoria. Lots of royalty-related stuff. And you got early fashion. So, the fashionable lady. And a few little conveniences around the home here, starting to creep in. And then these are the pictures that I like, because these are actual bits that have been saved, biscuit tins and little HP sauce bottle and things like that from the era. And when you think, as we look at this today, these are like 110 years old. It's quite amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. I mean, this stuff with like the Cadburys and that, I've been to the Cadburys Museum in Bourneville, in Birmingham, and they don't have anything like that in their own archives, at least not on public display, early age of road transport and the automobile, scouting, and of course starting to get airplanes for commercial travel. Early gramophones, and there's gramophone tins there in the top right corner. You keep your needles in those, your record player needles. And of course the rise of, I guess, the early black and white films. People like Charlie Chaplin, huge stars of their day. The black and white movies. I'm sure we'll see Harold Lloyd and Laurel and Hardy as we go along. But Charlie Chaplin came to prominence during the First World War. Some of the comics and papers, girls and boys papers of the time. On scouting. Boy Scouts and Scouts, and the Girl Guides, of course. There's some period board games. It's a very popular time for board games. And once again, these games are around, that I go to the toy fairs regularly, and you always see a few like real vintage board games of this sort of era, and some of the 1910s books up there. Some good stuff. Here's some more board games. A lot of them have got military themes, of course, because of the war. Some early dexterity games. They're all wartime related. Trench football, the silver bullet, On the Way to Constantinople, How to Get to Berlin. And other little block games and card games as well. Obliterating Germany, the latest war puzzle. Absolutely fascinating stuff, and reasonably easy to collect these days, that sort of thing. It's not something that a lot of people are looking for. So consequently, when collectors sadly die and their collections go on the market, there seems to be plenty of it around, and it doesn't go for a fortune. And I said, quite a good era to collect this, if this is what you're into. Obviously, this is during the war. So much of everyday life was turned towards the First World War, and obviously the same during the second, as we'll see later on as we go through. Lots of issues of Fragments from France. It's of Bruce Bairnsfather, a famous cartoonist, very, very popular. This sort of stuff is just incredibly rare. And we got the tobacco and the first very earliest sort of cigarette packets there. Very early OXO stuff as well. Look, the OXO trench heater. Incredible. There it is. Look, up there. They've got one, of course, in the collection. And they've got lots of this stuff actually in the flesh at the Museum of Brands in London, which I did go and visit a couple of years ago, and it was fantastic. I did film most of it as well, so I'll link to that video at the end here, because you do get, I mean, the displays change all the time, so it's worth going back again and again. And next time I'm in London, I will be visiting again. But to see how it was a year or so ago, have a little look at that video, which I shall link to at the end. And there we are at the classic poster there. Yeah, Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? A propagandist recruitment drive poster, one of the most famous ones. And then we are once again events of the 1910s. There we are. So that is the second book in the series. So after the 1910s, it's obvious that we've got the 20s. And thank goodness the First World War was over, a lot of people were saying. As I said, these books didn't get published in decade order. They jumped around a little bit, but we're looking at them in the correct order as you know, as time goes on, as it were. And there is Robert Opie there. There he is. He does start to make it the odd cameo in the books in this introductory bit. Here we are, more stuff for improving your home. And then another stunning page of actual tins and pots and sauces, and just incredible, isn't it? Look at these little tubs of Walls ice cream. Absolutely amazing. The you know, the biscuit tins, you can imagine those being saved because they were so colourful. And I kid you not, at the Museum of Brands, they had a huge wall of biscuit tins, and it was just, you just couldn't believe what you were seeing. It was that good. Then a double spread of the cigarettes. It was very, very fashionable to smoke back then in the 1920s. In fact, all the way through really to the 70s, it was fashionable to smoke. And only really started dying out, I guess, in the 80s, early 80s. Now a selection of postcards and comedy cards. Felix the cat and your Bonzo the dog. The ladies' magazines of the period, fashion, high fashion. This is the age of Vogue, I suppose. I'm sure Vogue was around in the 1920s. Maybe it's not quite started yet. Needlework and fashion. This is celebrating jazz, the jazz age, and the foxtrot and the tango, and a rage for jazz and mask parties. There we are. That's what that's celebrating there. A selection of magazines again. was the women's mags. These are more aimed at the sporting world, football favourites, sports for boys. A selection of the comics of the period for the youngsters. Chick Zone and Tiger Tim. A selection of board games. Absolutely fantastic. Love this sort of stuff. Early Hornby now. We've got some Hornby trains creeping into it. Meccano, Dinky, of course. Pip and Squeak came to prominence. Felix, again, the character. Motion pictures. So we got a bit more Charlie Chaplin and other film stars now. Tom Mix, Rin Tin Tin. And this is looking at wirelesses. The amateur wireless came into its own. And I guess there was a few people speaking to each other and listening in around the world. And of course, well, the launch of the BBC and Radio Times each week. Obviously, it was just radio then, no TV just yet. Illustrated London News. Stuff on the British Empire. And some overseas workers this time. So they don't touch on a lot of overseas stuff. It is predominantly British. But there is some stuff in here from other countries. Nice early selection of London transport timetables and maps. I love the stuff from this period, especially. These sorts of posters are just almost iconic, and you can buy this sort of these posters in reprint form from the London Transport Museum in London. They've got a very good website as well if you like that sort of thing. I mean, I think they're gorgeous, and I love the old tube and underground maps, and I think they're fantastic. And what a beautiful selection they've got here. I mean, these are just terrific and very expensive. The early London transport maps and that anything pre-war is quite pricey to buy nowadays. But yeah, the London Transport Museum's the place to go. Absolutely amazing for that sort of stuff. Early motorcycles as well as the cars now. And yeah, all the rage here. Some motoring related games. And travel jigsaws here. Got the Age of the Blimp as well. Look at that, Canadian Pacific. What a great poster that is. To Canada and the USA, only 4 days in open sea. Electrification, Southern Electric. The railway network there. It's very strong in the UK. And then taking a break, going on holiday by the looks of it. Scarborough, the queen of watering places. And there are some more of those lovely travel posters there at the back, which are fantastic. The 1930s ones are especially great. Or 1920s ones into the 30s, I should say. Anyway, there we are. What a great book that one is. And from the 1920s, we go straight on into the 1930s. There we are. And as I said, if you are interested in these, I'm certain they're all available on Amazon. So I'll pop a link in the description down below so you can have a look at the full range, basically. So there we are, contents of this page. Actually, I've missed one there. That's the spread of what's coming up in this issue. Lots of very, very cool stuff indeed. Yeah, we've got some early penguins there, some early paperbacks. Nice to see. So once again, as you see, the books are starting to form a bit of a pattern each one now, each decade. Similar subjects are being covered. I think that's a really good way of doing it. So you get to see the continuity. They are literally little time capsules, aren't they? A little window back in time to, well, a time gone. There we are. So there's recognisable brands here. And you forget how old some of these brands actually are, you know. Early chocolate bars now. I mean, these are just incredible, really, aren't they? Absolutely incredible. And some of them, you know, potentially haven't changed that much in, you know, 90 to 100 years. And certainly brands that are still around today, things like Turkish Delight and Kit Kat. Terry's All Gold. Early box of Quality Street there. These are like detergents and stuff around the house, cleaning products. I mean, who would have kept this sort of stuff except someone like Robert Opie? Bathroom products now, soap and talcs. Toothpastes, you see the very earliest sort of toothpastes there have started to creep in. Early bar, things of Colgate, packets of Colgate. Newspapers of the time. And ladies' fashion. And stuff for the toddlers as well. The youngsters getting a look in this time round. A big old selection of comics here, but we do get to see the Beano and Dandy have now been added. Interestingly, number 2 of the Beano and number 2 of the Dandy, not number 1. So I don't know what happened with those. I'm sure he's got them. And then some toys of the period, toys and games. Some stuff from Snow White, that was this era as well, wasn't it? The 30s. Yeah, the rise of the annual. I mean, the annual started to get very big in the 1930s, didn't it? There's the Mickey Mouse one there. Time for early Disney, of course. Travel guides. More on motoring. Very much an emphasis of people starting to take holidays in the car now, or going off for the day, have a picnic or something like that. It was that motoring life, as it were. If you had a car, it opened up a lot of the British Isles, didn't it? Same as the railway network, they were very much encouraging you to go off and spend a day somewhere different. Towns by the coast, for example. This is European travel now. Some fantastic stuff around the world, in fact, there. And cruising and cruise-related stuff, mid-1930s. Of course, it won't be long before the shadow of the Second World War starts to cast its eye over things. But very much in the 30s, Britain, along with a lot of the rest of the world, was in complete denial. They just didn't want to go through another war again, and sort of turned a blind eye until things got very bad, as we know, as we'll see in the next volume. Here's the Radio Times for the period. Once again, amateur wireless and what have you. 1930s cigarette packets of the day. The football album for the cigarette cards that would start around this time, or of the period at least. Loads of different ones: radio celebrities, RAF badges, speedway riders. Yeah, such distinctive, like 30s design on some of this stuff. Fireworks and early fireworks stuff. And for Christmas, boxes of crackers. Then we got our Royal commemoratives of the era. And that takes us nicely up to the Second World War. Okay, so 1939 to 45. This is the Wartime Scrapbook from Blitz to Victory. It's the next one chronologically, and it very much looks at the war years, the Second World War years. It's the same format as what we're used to seeing, but obviously it is all Second World War related. It's it is a fascinating part of British history. The stuff that was produced under wartime conditions is especially good, and when you think of how difficult it was to produce anything, particularly anything printed, because paper was so short. So all of that is taken into consideration. And when you look at this sort of stuff, you realise just, it was amazing how much actually did get produced. This is stuff related to the Blackout, a Blackout card game as well there. But yes, it's the age of rationing. Always carry your gas masks. There they are, little ones for the youngsters as well. Barrage balloons, and these are the official sort of government released publications, information on air raids and being an air raid warden. And there was various drives throughout the war, like empty jam jars and drives for metal, things like that. There we are, a very basic cigarette packet there, just like a wrap around it. Everything was cut to the bone during the war to save money and to help the overall war effort. Wartime cookbooks, very, very popular in their day. How to make your ration go further. There was a big surge in grow your own as well, which is very popular. And World War II greeting cards. Make, do, amend was one of the slogans. And the wartime related women's magazines of the day, picture post, things like that, and boys comics here, and a few girls. These are your World War II related games and puzzles. The game of Bomber Command. And this looks like sheet music of the day. Then the fantastic poster, that one, HMSO one. And these are books on aircraft recognition. So one of the big things was to have these books, and Penguin did a couple. They were very successful, but they were books of like silhouettes of planes. So you could look up to the sky and you could theoretically identify what plane was in the sky. And they were updated throughout the war. Here's a little section on growing your own vegetables, which is also a massive pastime. But it also had obviously a practical purpose, and any bit of green, any bit of garden at all was generally being dug over to grow vegetables, being potatoes and carrots, all the basics. Not an era really for much extravagance with the world of chocolate. In the back of the pure paperbacks, they've got Mars bars being cut into slices. There just wasn't a lot of it to go around, and even post-war, there was problems. Joined the Women's Land Army for the ladies at home. They were running the farms in a lot of cases. This is issues related to them. Even on the cover of Woman's Own there. Join the ATS. The Home Guard. Just in case Britain did get invaded, the Home Guard was formed, of course. The traditional Dad's Army. Period postcards. Great selection of those. Absolutely beautiful condition. Look at that. Ministry of Labour munition concerts. And these are some of the American ones, because of course we had a lot of Americans stationed in the UK prior to D-Day, and they with them brought their American cigarettes, their American comics, and papers and chocolate bars and chewing gum even. So yes, they were felt, their influence was felt in the UK prior to D-Day. And there's the wartime larder there. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. And all very patriotic, of course. God save the King and all that. Here's a space for your own family memories. So any wartime family memories, you could put them in there, right in there, to finish off your own book. My parents were both evacuated during the Second World War. They were youngsters at the time. And then a period board game at the end there. It was a Beat the Blitz board game. That's what that one is. Designed and drawn by Jade, 1940. And there we are. So that's a very different sort of wartime, a different scrapbook, being just on the wartime years, but still fascinating. And obviously, after the 40s, or the wartime, came the 1950s. So I'm not sure whether we'll see any late 40s in here as well, just to continue the story, as it were. But the 50s was very much a different decade, and there were different sorts of things. And the start of the space race, or man into space at least, yet more scientific sort of advances. Plasticine there, we've got the Guinness advertising here, we've got the comics, yeah, bit of Dan Dare, Davy Crockett. So yeah, classic 1950s decor. The record player at home. You have the pop charts started, and the birth of rock and roll. But initially here we got a page on the Festival of Britain, which is 1951. Beautiful. I love the Festival of Britain branding. Abraham Games designed the Festival of Britain logo, and it's very, very famous. They did it for 1851. They did it for 1951. I wonder if they'll do it for 2051. Who can imagine? 26 years away. Yeah. Both my parents went to the Festival of Britain. I would, as you know, the youngsters, I would love to have been able to go myself, but I wasn't even born at that point. And there's not a great deal left, because after the exhibition finished, it was all knocked down, except Festival Hall. But there is at least some video footage of it online. The coronation then of the Queen, Elizabeth II, 1953. Loads of relateds to everything possible had some sort of tie into the coronation. There's a coronation Kit Kat there from 1953. And this is a range of domestic homeware, this sort of stuff that was sold in Woolworths. It was their own brand. You still see that around today, occasionally. And people starting to get home appliances in their homes, things like cookers and refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, practical householder, all the things to improve your house and your home. And then the 1950s lager. We've got some very early bottles of squash and, pop. Amazing. Fantastic. And just in such superb condition. You've got your 1950s cereal boxes along the top there as well. Early Heinz tins there. Absolutely amazing. And some dairy. And frozen foods, of course, to put in your new fridge. Look, the new electric refrigeration. That lovely new fridge. Look at her there. She opened up. Ta-da! But you needed stuff to put in it, didn't you? And there we are, some early frozen items. And then a double page spread, finally, back to the good old days of a decent chocolate bar. And there was plenty there, and there was always new brands coming in and leaving. There was early Penguin bars there. Got your detergents and cleaning stuff. And things for the bathroom, including your toothpaste and creams and talcum powder. Your ladies' fashions. You got your Twingo sunglasses there. They were 1 and 9. And then ladies' magazines. Still got some of the long running ones. There's Vogue. We've got Picture Post, Woman's Realm. Selection of cigarettes, packets and designs. Get a big advert there as well. And your fireworks of the day. I mean, they haven't really changed that much even today, have they? Then books and annuals of the time. Lots of space stuff. You know, certainly space was a thing. It was the rise of the that started the space race in effect. Rupert was still very popular. You had Biggles, you had the westerns, early Dr. No there, James Bond getting a look in. Famous Five. They don't cover loads of books in this series, but, I mean, because that would be a book in itself, wouldn't it? But some key stuff is definitely featured. There's the eagle there. And that is number 1 of the eagle. Most of the comics, they do show the first issues, but they just didn't for Dan D'Ambino. There's a spread of Dan Dare related memorabilia. Just look at the iconography of that. It's just fantastic, isn't it? Very, very nice. And you do see this around still. It does still turn up in the odd sale. Dan Dare related memorabilia. Early train sets. Old Magic Robot. Very early Subuti up the top there. Fingertip. Football up the top corner. Slinky. You know, some stuff that's still around today. This is a page of diecast. So this was, you could say, the explosion of diecast. You had the early Matchbox toys at the top row there. Very, very nice. Spot On had a little section. Dinkies in the middle row there, which came out of the Meccano. And then the early Metoy, or Mimics there, the Metoy, which evolved into Corgi. So there's a nice little cross-section of diecast of the era. Very nice indeed. And then the board games. 1950s board games. They've got loads of these ones with bell games. There's the Bilko one there. Amazing. Lots of some of these, well, I say a lot of, some of these are TV tie-ins now. Early Palatoy Archie Andrews doll. Don't see that very often. Then your home TV set, of course. So this is what you had at home if you were lucky enough. You actually had a little TV set there. Very, very small. But that's what people had. And that in itself created the first early TV stars. Some had come from radio, people like Tony Hancock, and made the transition from radio to TV. Others making them stars, people like Peter Sellers and Benny Hill there. 1950s cars and the bicycle. Sunny Broadstairs on the Kentish coast. So there's promoting travel again, and we got Butlins for your holiday. Go to your Butlins holiday camp. And of course, overseas travel. And then the hit parade. There it was. It was the start of the hit parade with Elvis and Frank Sinatra, still very, very popular. Just people of that era. Russ Conway, Dwayne Eddy, Perry Como, Cliff, of course, Cliff Richard. And then the movie stars of the day, as seen in like Photoplay and Picture Goer. Lassie, big star. And then this is like a montage of movie posters over there on that side of it. And other advertisements. And that was the 1950s. What a decade. Moving on to the 1960s with that fantastic Electric Hendrix cover there. Jimi Hendrix cover. And, one of my favourite decades for sure, the 60s. So much great stuff was launched in the 1960s. And I love the music and I love the TV shows. There's a lot of great stuff in the 1960s. And, a book of this sort can only cover so much, but there's so much in here on every single page. I mean, it's just the detail just on this spread here is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Little mini moke from The Prisoner. Records. Posters. There's Robert Opie again in his 60s attire. This time I think that might be his daughter who's with him. And they're doing like a 60s living room there with some key posters up on the wall. Just amazing. Goldfinger poster. Blue Peter. Some of the homeware. I recognise some of this. So we'll keep the same format again, but now we've got the 1960s larder. And the odd TV sort of tie-in has crept in now. We've got Captain Scarlet up there. Joe 90. Little sugar smacks for Captain Kirk and Thunderbirds there. Very nice. And that's the chocolate page. Look at that. What a selection. And another fantastic page here on sweet cigarette cards. I have done a video with a friend of mine called Andy, who's got an amazing collection of these sweet cigarette cards. So once again, I shall try and remember to link to that one at the end of this video, because it's one, if you like this sort of stuff, it's a fantastic, fantastic display. Ice lolly wrappers. Who saved those, you know? Then we got your cigarettes again. And your detergents from the era, the 60s detergents. And look at this beautiful tube toothpaste, just incredible. And this sort of stuff as well, so 60s, isn't it? Amazing, amazing stuff. Your 60s ladies' mags. And Birth of Barbie and Cindy. More fashion magazines there. Then Private Eye and British Underground magazines, It and Oz. A couple of the most famous ones of the day. And more for the teens. 19 is new, just look at that, amazing. Girl was still going, of course. A lot of the comics were still going strong in the 60s. And music related ones, Teen Beat, Ready Steady Go, and the TV shows. And there's the top 10. Lots of nice picture EPs there and singles. Then a spread of Beatles and Beatles related memorabilia, the yellow submarine down the bottom there, Beatles jigsaw. Fantastic stuff. And then more towards 66, 67 upwards with Hendrix, the Stones, the psychedelic era, Pink Floyd, Cream. Little transistor radios that appeared, very, very nice, very attractive and very collectible today. Birth of the Soap with Coronation Street, still going today. Early Coronation Street memorabilia there. And some more, a selection of iconic sort of Radio Times covers of the day. And movie posters, of course, which I'm guessing, Robert Opie must have all these in his collection. It wouldn't have been something that he wouldn't have collected, being they were, I guess, so disposable. It would have been just the sort of thing he would have kept hold of. Then a spread of James Bond and related memorabilia, and cars, records. You got a little run of the pan books down the bottom there. The Gilbert figures. Thunderball special magazine, that one. All very cool stuff. Then some catalogues, 50s motoring, 60s motoring rather, but they got some Little toy catalogues dotted around as well. And foreign travel, which we saw. Early tube of sun cream there, and a Kodak Instamatic, of which there was many. Take your Instamatic on holiday, get a few snaps. The amazing comics of the period from the 1960s. Obviously, these are the British ones. They've not really touched on American at all. But, you know, the launch of TV21, TV comic, Lady Penelope, Shoot. So many. Classic board games. Launch of Action Man. Dr. Kildare's stethoscope. Can't imagine many of them have survived. Danger Man board game. Very, very nice, that one. And then some Doctor Who early Dalek memorabilia for Dalek Mania along the top there. Got your Camberwick Green Village Folk. Little rubber figures there. Some Uncle. Girl from Uncle. Z cars. Magic roundabout curtains down the side. All classic stuff. And then the world of Jerry Anderson in a lovely double page spread. Look at that. Thunderbirds and Lady Penelope, Captain Scarlet, Stingray, Supercar. Amazing stuff. Then space race stuff. So Man on the Moon, of course. Towards the very end of the decade. Kept the space race prominent. And a selection of British annuals, again, by now very well established, but you got some early, like the first Blue Peter book is in there as well. Avengers. And then 1966, the year Britain won the World Cup, with World Cup Willie and World Cup Willie related memorabilia. Look at that. Some fantastic stuff there. The World Cup Bagatelle. Wow. There it is there, behind that little plastic bagatelle. Boxed, of course. The Radio Times for the World Cup. Fantastic stuff. Yes, amazing. So that was the 1960s. And we'll move swiftly on to the 1970s. Another fantastic decade. Got the dance floor there. And this was one of the last ones to get published, I believe. They have not done one for the 1980s. So decade-wise, this is the last dedicated one. But you can see what we've got here, you know, ABBA, the Mr. Men, Star Wars, Doctor Who, all of it was big in this decade. Punk, there he is, Robert Opie as a young Sid Vicious. And yeah, quite amazing. Introduction of the decimal currency. This is what this page is all about. Got rid of our shillings and pence. And went decimal. Then once again, improving your home. So we've got Habitat and now on the scene. We've got Argos. And your 70s larder. First time I've spotted Ribena. Amazing, amazing stuff. The Mr. Men yogurt pots there. And look at that, crisps. So there were crisp packets in the 60s, of course, but the rise of sort of the illustrated ones, I guess, started in the 1970s here. And there's some absolute crackers, early Monster Munch there. Stuff with celebrities on. There's one for Kenny Everett's video show. Smith crisps there. All sorts. Outer Spacers, I remember. And there was a horror line as well, yeah. Horror Fangs. Bad Fangs. And there's a Bones. Horror Bags Bones up there. I think they're quite collectible these days. Thing is, how many people saved this sort of stuff? You know, there wasn't that many. Texan, the chocolate bar, I'd love them to bring back. Mr. Men chocolate bars there. Pink Panther bar, Star Trek, Doctor Who, the Wombles. And you do sort of see these odd wrappers now and again if you're patient enough. Then 1970s cigarette packets. It's interesting how the design has changed on these, hasn't it, so much. Then your larder. Some cans of beer there, which is the first time we've seen those, isn't it? You could have a beer at home. You don't need to go to the pub. And classic 70s fashion. Dig your flares. It's all good stuff. Look at that. Look at those heels there. How amazing are those? They're just terrific, aren't they? Real period pieces from 50 years ago now, this stuff, what we're looking at here. So there will be people watching this video who will remember this stuff. I certainly do. Not all of it, but I certainly remember some of this when I was growing up. Which is why I wish they'd carry on and do like the 80s and 90s. Because I think the time is right for that to happen. It's the girls' comics of the day. And then we had late 70s, we got smash hits, of course. Queen, Kiss, of course, became a big thing. Nice to have these little pin badges, very much, again, of their day. Zigzag, the rock magazine, the Melody Maker. A little page on punk, early punk stuff. Anarchy in the UK. And then sort of more underground magazines of the period. We've still got Private Eye, Gay News, Marxist Bulletin, Rolling Stone. Well, I wouldn't call that underground, but it's books aimed at sort of the alternative audience, as it were. Oz obviously got prosecuted, and that was the book on it, The Trials of Oz, taken to court. Football of the era. So Mexico 70, there were high hopes that England were going to pull it off again, and sadly it didn't happen, but there was an awful lot of stuff produced for it. Once again, that's been covered on the channel in a couple of football videos. These early 70s stars. And your 70s cars. And travel. Visit the lines of Longleat. And your Doctor Who radio times there right in the middle, but we got other TV times, of course, for the ITV network. Great stuff you don't usually see in a New Avengers. You got the Liverbirds cover there. It Ain't Half Hot Mum. Rise and Damn, Leonard Rossiter there. The Good Life. Some great stuff there. Some great stuff. The Professionals, Two Ronnies. Faulty Towers there. And then the boys and girls comics of the era. Remember having a few of these through my hands. Cheeky and Target I had an issue of. I remember Knockout. For me in the 70s, it was more, I guess, towards the tail end. It was, Star Wars Weekly, Doctor Who Weekly, 2000 AD. They were the ones I remember having, but they were more towards the end of the 70s. Classic British annuals, hardback annuals, still going great guns for another few years yet. And board games of the era. More games here. The Play School, Paddington Bear, of course, the Smurfs. Barely touched on. Doctor Who toys. Still got some TV movie die-casts being released here. It was the age of the action figure. And got your Star Wars stuff. Star Trek. I know all the early sort of carded figures are in the Star Wars, that is, are in the Museum of Brands. They have got them. And then posters of the era, which you saw last time. Great selection of real cult films there. Some good stuff. The Jules. Fantastic. Then royal commemoratives for the era. The main thing was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, wasn't it? But that will be covered in the next book. This is a little sheet, the Robert Opie Scrapbooks, detailing them all. I see there is an Edwardian one, which I haven't got. The Edwardian Scrapbook. Yeah, that's one I've never actually got around to getting. So I must look out for that. I can't see any others that I'm missing here. I think there is one which was called Sweet Memories, and that came out before these scrapbooks came out. Then on the back page here, it's fantastic. Your Cuddly Wombles, and you got the Muppets. Oh, great stuff. ABBA dolls, Charlie's Angels. Good stuff. Right, the Royal Scrapbook. So this is one that focuses on the incredible age of the Royal Commemorative, and well, it was a huge thing. It's always been a huge thing in the UK, of course. Not everyone loves the royal family, but generally speaking, I don't think anyone wishes them ill will. Their role has very much changed over the decades, and I think they do what they can now. I think it is what it is. The royal family is part of Britain, and that's why this book has been released, because throughout the years, royalty and royal commemoratives have been a massive part of British sort of culture, really. And that's what this is looking at. And quite a bit more depth to this one. There's a bit more background. Items are placed in historical context to what was actually going on at the time. And you'll see that just about every single brand in the country involved itself with the royal family in some way, as much as they possibly could. Anything the royal family ate, drank, smoked, whatever, wore, they could put on it by royal command or by royal appointment. So there was a lot of cachet with the royal family. It's as simple as that. And when you go to the Museum of Brands in London, there's quite a bit of this stuff on display, cases and cases of it, because there was so much made, and it is part of British history. It may not be the most interesting to everyone, but it's still part of British history, and I'm glad the book was published here, which is absolutely full of it. And as you can see, there's loads more information as well. So I think this themed book is really great. And once again, it sort of goes along in historical order here, up to when the book was published. First World War now. And you don't see much duplication from what we saw throughout the original books into this one. There's very little, in fact, because just so much was produced. It's as simple as that. Absolutely amazing stuff here. And so well preserved. I mean, really, really beautifully preserved. I just don't know how Robert Opie did it. I just do not know how he did it, whether he had some sort of amazing find, or if he just spent his entire adult life collecting this stuff before it just got chucked away. I think the foresight that him and his very understanding wife must have had is just incredible. And he saved this stuff for the nation, really, because it could have so easily got lost. And the fact that you can visit it now in the Museum of Brands is fantastic. Here we are, into the Queen Elizabeth age now. Yeah, the coronation really was massive, wasn't it? Absolutely enormous. Look at that, it's a 12 souvenir OXO tins there for the Queen's coronation. I mean, you might find the odd one, but finding the shop display box is incredible. And of course, it may even be that one there. This is how Matchbox got started. They produced a little miniature version of the stagecoach, and it was a million seller, and that started Matchbox Toys, the brand. We got Prince Charles becoming the Prince of Wales, now our king. Then the 77 Silver Jubilee, which I remember as a youngster, street parties and what have you. And we got the wedding of Prince Andrew, after Prince Charles and Diana, of course, then Prince Andrew and Fergie. Huge in its day, absolutely massive. The Charles and Diana wedding, national bank holiday, and that ended on the sad note with Diana dying. But there we are. That's the Royal Scrapbook, and we have one more. So this isn't part of the scrapbook series, but as you can see, it's by Robert Opie, and this is more a general overview of everything that we've just seen, really. Once again, I believe you can still get this one. It's still in print. It's a much more substantial book, but it goes a little bit further than what we've seen in the scrapbooks. So I think it warrants, once again, it does warrant a little go through. I'm trying to see when this is. Yes, so it says first published once again in 1999. But I'm pretty sure this is still in print. So if you do want to get one of these, you should be okay. And interestingly, it goes through the decades that we've seen, but it does include the 80s and the 90s. And that's the only time that Robert Opie really has touched on those decades in particular. So we'll fly through, as this is our last one now. There's a bit about the collection there, and there's lots more about it when you visit the Museum of Brands, and the gift shop has got all of these books in stock. So that's another reason to go there if you want to, although, as I said, you can get them from Amazon. And I remember I was in the book game when I was selling these, and they are fantastic. They usually come sealed as well, the scrapbooks. So yeah, it's just going working its way through the different subjects that are covered. Very much like the scrapbooks, and then it's era by era. And once again, it's a book full of photographs that speak 1,000 words. That's how I would describe this. But in the name of completeness, I will go through them all. And it is different content. You know, we didn't see the Peter Rabbit books and that, because so much happened in each different decade. It's impossible to show it all in one book. You know, you'd need hundreds of pages for every single decade. So this is another way to revisit it. And I think it's a great overview of all the decades if you just want to get a little feel for it. The 20s. I said there is another book, and I've never tracked a copy down because I think it is duplicating content, but it's called Sweet Memories. It's much smaller format, and that looks at the early days of chocolate and sweets and confectionery in the UK. Yeah, so each decade gets a few pages. Absolutely fantastic. There's no book like this anywhere, not that I know of. And if there is one, do leave a comment down below. Snow White stuff. Maybe this is a compilation of stuff that was all scanned and photographed for the main scrapbooks, and maybe just didn't make it in through lack of room, you know? Errol Flynn there. Into the 1940s now, wartime. First Giles annual there. Under the humour section. There we are, VE Day, and much scarcer, I would imagine, the VJ Day rule commemoratives. Post-war events, yes. Early Thomas the Tank Engine. The 1950s and TV coming around again. Serials and fashion, travel and holidays, all the things we've sort of seen in the other books. Movies, radio and TV toys, always a great subject. So I suppose this would be the one to get if you just wanted a general overview of the merchandise and memorabilia that was published or released in the UK around, well, over the last sort of 100 years. This is a good way to look at it all. In summary, the 70s here now. You got your culture and counterculture. You've seen that one before. Tretyakov there, famous lady. Pop music. And the films, very important. TV stuff. Space hopper there. And New Frontiers for space race related items. Now we're on to the 1970s. Video game there, Busby. More great fashion. Aftershave, Brute. Nothing beats the great smell of Brute. Board games. Little page bit on punk again. Music. Bionics. Star Wars, the movies. Grease is the word. Then move on to the 80s, which wasn't covered in the in its own sort of book. Things that happened in the 80s. The Royal Weddings, Roland Rat, E.T., huge, Ghostbusters, and Robocop. Adam and the Ants was huge. Boy George. Transformers, of course. The 80s was really something, wasn't it? 18. There's loads of it in the museum. Absolutely stacks of 80s stuff. And then on to the 90s. More new creations, things like the Turtles there. And the Spice Girls. And there we are. That's where it ends. So, cracking. Absolutely cracking. So there we are. So that is your whistle-stop tour through all the Robert Opie books in my collection. I hope you've really enjoyed that little look through. They are absolutely fantastic. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please give the video a thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage content. And I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.